The bear bit down on Brad's shoulder and effortlessly flung his body several feet to the right, only to charge him again and begin digging into his back. Brad clenched his teeth, hoping and praying to God that the sow would let him go and vanish into the woods. As he gasped for air, she continued to savagely gnaw and chew all over his upper body region. Then, suddenly, without warning, she dropped him. Had his prayers been answered? Did the female grizzly finally feel at ease and assured he was no longer a threat? Brad, laying on his side, opened his eyes, blood draining down his forehead. He tried not to move or make a sound, but was anxious to find if she had left, and if he could begin crawling away for help in pursuit of David Zorhoff, who at this moment should only be about 100 yards away from where Brad lay in ruin. He couldn't hear anything or see anything from his limited viewpoint, so he took the risk. He began to slowly crawl in the direction of help. Before he could make it 2 feet, horror struck again. She had him by his right bicep, this time clamped down hard with evil intent. He knew if he played dead again, she might leave. But to his horror, he heard something approaching on his right. Another bear. A young Bruin, maybe 200 pounds, stepping over his mangled carcass. It lowered its large head and looked Brad in the eyes for just a moment, then pounced, grabbed his face with its jaws, shredding and tearing, almost mimicking its mother's behavior. 2 bears, ripping him to pieces. Brad falling in and out of consciousness.
What's up, guys? Iceman here.
So this story is called The Watchers, and it's already seeming to be quite intriguing, wouldn't you say? So before we get into it, I'd like to first off thank you guys for all your support on this channel, as it has been growing exponentially. And I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button, subscribe to this page, and hit the bell so you're notified next time I post a video. And if you want to support me further, you can become a patron or a channel member. Links in the description below. And blessings to those who support the Iceman. So before I bore you with these bearing details, let's get into this bear of a story. Growing up in Soldotna, Alaska, on the Kenai Peninsula, Brad always found hunting to be a form of escapism, venturing out into the great wild, leaving behind the trappings of the world, if only for a moment. It was a great way to clear his mind, to reset, and to gain perspective. He worked on semi-truck air conditioners for a living, made about $65K a year, and always maxed out his 401k. It wasn't until he met a beautiful young mother of 2 that he began taking risks. Hannah was a fine young lady, and Brad did his best to be a father of her 2 young kids. But family dynamics were strained. He was looking for a traditional relationship, but Hannah's personality had been shaped by years of single motherhood. Brad's existing anger issues had been amplified since he began taking supplemental testosterone. At only 29 years old, he was burning out. He wanted an escape, a way to buy time, so he could reset and focus on himself again. But he didn't want to break it off with Hannah. He had found the pursuit of one eligible woman difficult enough, and he didn't want to enter the race again. With social media dating on the rise, he knew he would be considered ineligible to most young women because of his height, or lack thereof, rather. So he had to think of another plan. He had to get rich, quick. He convinced Hannah that they should put most of their saved money into cryptocurrency, pointing out the speculative graphs and its potential futures, claiming the trajectory would make them both millionaires or better. She hesitantly agreed on the endeavor, and of course, within 6 months, their crypto investments tanked. It was May of 2022, Terra USD and Luna collapsed. and multiple crypto platforms folded in the aftermath. This caused huge emotional turmoil in their relationship. Hannah accused him of manipulating her into losing her life savings, and he scrambled to try and convince her that everything would be alright, and maybe their investments would turn around. It wasn't until Brad drove his hand through his basement drywall during a heated argument that he decided it was time for a break away from his current situation. The Kenai Peninsula is home to a subgroup of brown bears, geographically isolated from the rest of the brown bear population. The subset species is referred to as the Kenai Peninsula brown bear, and there are estimated to be less than 600 individuals in the group. Hunting the bears in this area has occurred in the recent past, but is currently banned due to population decline. The wildlife refuge on the peninsula is part of the larger federally designed Kenai Wilderness, 1.3 million acres of mostly undeveloped wild lands, an area rich in biodiversity. It is important for both wildlife conservation and outdoor tourism. The Kenai Peninsula brown bear is the charismatic symbol of the wildlife refuge, and a bucket list item for many tourists coming to Kenai, Soldotna, or Seward. Fortunately for Brad, he was contacted by David Zorhoff, an old friend from high school, who was in need of a vacation as well. David was going through a divorce. It was summer, and moose season began in late August. They both took a week off work and purchased a moose tag, which permits the bearer to harvest one bull with spike fork or 50-inch antlers, or 3 or more brow tines on one side. Adult male moose, called bulls, can reach 7 foot tall at the shoulder and weigh up to 1,600 pounds. Bringing home a harvest like that, maybe 500 pounds of meat, Brad thought he might make Hannah proud. On the 3rd day of the trip, late in the afternoon, David had bagged a huge bull at 80 yards, not far from their rental cabin. It was a chore to field dress such a large animal. They had spent the better part of 2 hours working on the carcass, but it had to be quartered after being cleaned, then loaded onto a sled and hauled back to the cabin to be strung up. It was getting close to dusk, and David had taken a sled load back to the cabin. Brad was waiting near the gut pile for the sled to return for the final load of meat. He was happy for David's good luck, but he was beginning to doubt his own chances at filling his tag. His mind wandered back home, where he knew Hannah would have just picked up the kids from school. She had been happy for him to take a week off, even though money was tight ever since their bad investments. Brad had obviously needed some time to unwind, and the thought of a freezer full of meat helped too. At first, Brad didn't register the faint sounds he was hearing from the brush. His mind was elsewhere. The noises grew louder, small twigs snapping, heavy pine boughs swishing against each other. Brad finally noticed the sound and drew a breath in, sharply. 50 yards in front of him, the heavy cover split open like a stage curtain to reveal 2 enormous brown bears, heads lowered and charging. With mere seconds to react, Brad could only lift his arms and yell, hoping to startle them or intimidate them, or at least give them reason to pause. They kept coming, huffing and panting, heads swinging and jaws open. Brad's 30-06 was next to him, an arm's length away on the ground, and he scrambled for it. He got off one shot from the waist, then the bears were on him, swatting the rifle away like a toy and shoving the man backwards into a low patch of juniper. A massive weight pinned his lower body down, but his arms were free, and he flailed them with all his might, trying uselessly to push the larger 800-pound sow off his hips and legs. And suddenly, he remembered, play dead. Brad knew in that moment it was his only chance of survival. He played dead through pain worse than he could have ever imagined. he felt their fangs pierce his legs and buttocks. The smaller bear, probably the sow's juvenile cub, began digging into one of his thighs, flaying apart the muscle to reveal bone. They bit up and down his spine like a dog trying to break every bone in the body of a large rodent. At least at this point, the pain was beginning to fade. Brad no longer felt the pain, but his mind was filling with horror. Would he be paralyzed for life, never able to walk again? Would he die? He heard the sound of bones cracking under his thick Carhartt overalls. One of the creatures grabbed his skull in its jaws, trying to pull it forward in an attempt to reach Brad's vulnerable neck. He kept his chin tucked down to his chest tightly, and his arms were clenched protectively over his head, but their strength was astonishing. They refused to let up, and seemed to get more aggravated the more he protected himself. Huge clawed feet stomped on his chest, pushing him further into the ground. Jaws with long, yellow canines gripped his skull, and Brad imagined that this must be what death feels like. Impossibly, they stopped to rest. Brad lay where the bears left him. For whole minutes, he lay still and breathed, not sure if he could move, even if he wanted to. Peace came upon him then. He saw Hannah. He saw their family on Christmas, celebrating good spirits and gifts. He saw himself back at his job, working hard and feeling better than ever before. As he lay on the ground, cradled by the juniper bushes, he asked God to spare his life. He looked in the direction of the bears and wiped the blood from his eyes. Mistake. They had been watching him, and in seconds, they rushed his body again. This time, Brad felt that he observed from a distance as two bears tackled a man's broken body. He could see their gnawing jaws again, feeling for the places they had missed the last time. He had no choice this time but to play dead. His energy was spent, and he knew he didn't have much life left. How much blood has been lost? Again, the bears tire of their game and wander off. This time, Brad knew they were only a few yards away, watching again, probably watching him as they raided the gut pile from the moose. He lay still, this time with no intention of moving. A silence fell over the clearing, and Brad couldn't hear the bears at all. Peace came over him, and through red-streaked eyes, he looked up at the sky, where the sun was quickly retreating into the night. It was probably lights out for him, too, he thought calmly. Suddenly, a loud shot broke the silence, and the air was full of the sounds of two retreating bears, crashing loudly through the underbrush.
David!
Brad gasped.
David! Help!
With his final breaths, more gunshots. The sounds rung in Brad's ears as he finally drifted out of consciousness. My God! What do you guys think about that story? To my understanding, I believe Brad somehow survived this incident. He was mangled beyond recognition and had several painful surgeries, but I believe he made it out alive. But isn't that crazy how not only is it terrifying to be attacked by a single bear, but to imagine two bears gnawing away at your helpless body? I feel like it's quite rare of an incident for something like this to occur, but how terrifying is that? I believe that juveniles often stay with their mothers for several years when it comes to brown bears and grizzly bears. And these younglets can often reach several hundred pounds while still staying in the vicinity of their mother. And this is just one of those rare incidents where a human was in the wrong place at the wrong time. I remember reading a lot of bear stories in the past, and there's a known saying that goes throughout grizzly bear country. It's something to do with dinner bell bears, or something like that, where it seems to be an ongoing observed occurrence where a hunter shoots an elk or a moose or whatever, and the gunshot actually attracts bears because they associate those gunshots with the dead corpse of an animal or a gut pile at the least. So unfortunately for hunters, it springs on these sort of potential incidents. So it seems that you just have to really keep close watch if you're hunting in bear country, and to make sure that you have a partner always watching your back. I've heard of examples like this before, where one guy leaves and the other guy stays there cleaning the carcass and isn't paying attention, and a bear attack occurs. But I don't know, what do you guys think about that incident? Let me know in the comments below. Really appreciate you guys coming by here to check out my videos. I'll leave a link in the description of a playlist that has to do with a lot of these bear attacks on my channel. So if you want to check that playlist out, I'd really appreciate it and watch those videos. And I have been posting Sundays at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. So stay tuned for more chilling tales from the Iceman.